I want to give you an updated idea of what's going on in Israel and Palestine. We've got numbers for you, but bear in mind that every time we go over these numbers, God only knows what might have happened since we found them. But as of when we did this research, Palestinian officials had said that 120 people have been killed, 900 wounded, and additionally, coming from sources within the Israeli military, 8 Israelis, including 1 soldier, had been killed. Now, if you've been following this in the time between yesterday's episode of The Young Turks and today's, you had a massive aerial bombardment last night, eventually followed by a ground invasion of both ground troops and tanks. At one point, Israel had been deploying as many as 160 aircraft simultaneously, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that this operation will continue as long as it takes to restore peace and security to the state of Israel, or allow me to form a functioning government. One of those two things. Now, Joe Biden was being asked about this at a press conference, and he said that from his point of view, the response had not been in any way disproportionate. That it was just understandable. They were talking with the Israeli government, and of course he then sort of turned to, well, and not just Israel, we're also talking to Palestinians, but it was definitely an afterthought. And the concept that what we've seen, both in terms of the deployment of military hardware, the means, as well as the results, 120 people killed on the Palestinian side, 8 Israelis killed. That is basically what we see every time this cycle of violence continues. The president of the United States, the lead Democrat, says that's not disproportionate in any way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, this is the same Joe Biden that's always been the same way. When Bush slightly critiqued Israel in his term, Biden chastised him publicly, saying, how dare you criticize Israel publicly? If you have any kind of critique for Israel, God forbid, you should whisper that into their ear, and because otherwise that's gonna hurt our joint propaganda to make sure that everybody think Palestinians are evil and the Israelis government is godlike and never makes any mistakes. So this is classic Biden. He's a total hawk and very conservative right winger in foreign policy. That's just reality. The mainstream media can cry about it, but we got receipts. I can show you video after video, quote after quote, and so this is not at all surprising. But honestly, it's not just Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a classic politician. He just puts his finger to the wind. That's why he's going slightly left now, because the winds are going slightly left now. Back in the day when things were right wing, he was the most right wing Democrat you could find. So it's really Washington. And in Washington, and Ryan Grim at The Intercept, as usual, had a brilliant piece about this. Even as late as 2014, he found a perfect instance of a Democrat in New York talking about just in the middle of that last conflict, just saying love Palestine. That's it, that inoffensive. And all hell rained down on her, and they tried to kick her out of the Democratic Party for just saying, hey, it's okay to love Palestine. 2014 was only 7 years ago. And so I lived through that my whole life, and I talked about it on yesterday's show. No critique of Israel in any way, shape, or form, no matter if it was left-wing government, moderate government, right-wing government, was ever allowed. And you would try, and they would try to drive you from the public square. Who's they? The classic politicians, both corporate Republicans and Democrats, the mainstream media, etc. And it was just conventional wisdom that you're not even allowed to show any degree of support for Palestine. In fact, as late as 2016, when Bernie Sanders' team insisted after they lost the primary, but they were doing a joint task force on the Democratic platform, just saying we should be in favor of a 2-state solution and just mentioning Palestinians. Not any big demands on behalf of Palestinians, just mentioning they're also human, we should also take them into account and work towards a 2-state solution. No, the mainstream media and mainstream Democrats sent in people, honestly, it's uncomfortable, but it's true, people like Bakari Sellers, to go and kill that proposal on behalf of the Israeli lobby. That's reality, you could look into it, you can confirm what I'm saying is a fact. You might be made uncomfortable by that fact, but my point is I think that Bakari Sellers and the others that's up to them on whether they feel comfortable and they say, hey, listen, I represent the Israeli lobby and I don't think Palestinians should be represented. You should make that point not in the darkness of a room when they're discussing a platform where nobody can see them, but on television. So now, finally, we have progressives who are willing to stand up in Congress and say, I disagree. I think Palestinians are in fact human and should have human rights. And those are the Just Democrats that John is going to get to in a minute. But it is, understand how historic it is. 25 years of covering this, and this is the first time that anyone in power is ever saying that Palestinians have rights and should be respected as human beings, and we should also care about their lives. It's never happened in Washington before. It's a giant breakthrough. We'll give you the details of that in a second, but I want to let Mike jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to that note, back in 2014 when Israel was doing their incursion into Gaza, I remember trying to scour the internet to just hear any Democrat speak with some level of clarity. And like the best that we saw was that example that you brought up in that Ryan Grimm article where Jessica Ramos, she just tweeted out Palestine and a heart, that's it. And so even Bernie Sanders back then, I remember watching a live stream of a town hall that he did. And his response was terrible. I was genuinely shocked. Like my mouth was to the floor watching this because Bernie Sanders sounded a lot like Joe Biden today, to keep it real. And I love Bernie Sanders, he's moved a lot on this issue. But it really puts things into perspective. In 2014, Bernie Sanders was even terrible. And now we have not just one, but multiple members of Congress actually speaking with clarity, not only calling it an apartheid state, but you have Ilhan Omar, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment here, actually condemning Benjamin Netanyahu as a far-right ethno-nationalist. To me, this is so significant. Like it honestly feels like a paradigm shift. And I didn't ever expect this to happen. Like I thought that forever, the best that we'd get is silence from Democrats. But the tide is turning. And I think that what the squad is doing really, it proves that. And it's heartening to see.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make one quick note. I've been criticizing Bernie a lot lately because he's not using his leverage on economic issues. And Mike is definitely right about his past stance on Israel. But since 2016 on, 2015 on, he's been a warrior for justice on this issue. And again, I remember in 2016, first debate, presidential debate I ever saw in my life, actually probably at any level in America, where someone said that they cared about Palestinians' economic well-being. That was Bernie Sanders. And no one has been targeted more by fake Democratic groups that are actually just splinter groups of AIPAC more than Bernie Sanders has, even more than Ilhan Omar. Okay, so Bernie's been excellent on this issue today.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the Just Democrats.
Yeah, and I'll get to that in one second. I do want to say I think that the paradigm shift that Mike is talking about is there, and I don't even think it's necessarily constrained just to this issue. I think that over the past few years, you've seen a lot of congressional Democrats willing to speak with something much closer to sort of a clear moral vision on conflicts like in Yemen, of the US relationship with Saudi Arabia, that I can't imagine 10 or 15 years ago being very popular. The issue is that regardless of which of these situations we're talking about, it is still very well walled off from the leadership of either party. And in Yemen, you had some Republicans willing to work with people like Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna. But with the Democrats, we have these great individuals we're gonna talk about in the Just Democrats. But the statements that have been put out on the current situation in Israel by people like Biden or Pelosi or McConnell, you could just throw them all in a hat and pull them out for any one of them. They're basically the same thing.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.